The last of the Mohicans. Welcome back. My name is Peter Marcus, playing for the American Music Abroad Virtual Academy. I'm a two-tour AMA alumni, and I'm going to be talking about live looping. In the introductory video, we talked about why somebody would want to do live looping. 3 great reasons: to practice by yourself, to teach others and use as a teaching tool, and then what you just saw and what I love, performing. In the first video, you met my big loop station. Today, I'm just going to use the single stomp box, this little thing here. And we're going to talk about, first, how do we get the sound into the loop station? And then how do we get the sound out of the loop station? There's a lot of simple ways to do it. There's complex, expensive ways as well. And I'll give you a lot of options. And then we're going to talk about getting started with lining up your loops and just having a really basic skill on how do I do this and make it sound good. So first things first, let's talk about gear. And I want to talk first, how do we get the sound into the loop station? Now you can see here I have an acoustic-electric violin. And so if we were to look really closely, we can see that little 1/4-inch jack like you might have on an electric guitar or a keyboard. And that is going to be a really strong sound. So if you have an electric instrument, great. I know a lot of us out there don't. School students don't. Saxophone players don't. And so what do we do there? First off, this is super duper simple. I don't recommend it for performing unless you really mess with it and get a good sound. But it's one of these. It's just a little clip. Most commonly, we use these little clips so that we can plug it into a tuner. And then we're right there. String players, I know we clip them onto our bridge. I've seen trumpet players clip it onto their bell. But it works great, and they're like $10. I would say use this for practice by yourself, especially if you're on a budget. Next option, if you don't have a plug-in, that's to use a microphone. And you can use a mic that you hold in your hand or an instrument mic that you might have on your stand. I like to use these lavalier mics because they're really small and portable, really affordable. And I think this was about $17 US. And you can clip them on to the end of a bell, or you can clip them on somewhere on your instrument. One of the tricks about using a microphone of any kind is that you have to make sure that it's not picking up the sound coming out of your speaker, because then you will be looping your loop and it gets pretty messy pretty quickly. Also, with all of these, that whether you're using a cable or anything, make sure it is long enough. If you think it's going to be long enough, go with the next size bigger. That's what I have found. A 10-foot instrument cable is nice, but you're pretty much limited to just that spot. So you might go with a 15-foot instrument cable or extra cables like this. So let's plug this guy in and see what we got. Oh yeah, that's loud. I'm gonna use my little shiftily. This is an instrument I got on an American Music Abroad tour from Kosovo, a traditional Kosovan Albanian instrument. And I'll just clip, like I said before, just clip my mic onto my shirt. It should get the sounds. And let's see how it goes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... So you can hear the microphone. We can also use like a microphone. We can sing, get all kinds of vocal lines, make it pretty interesting. A lot of wide applications for any kind of microphone. So there it is, 3 different ways that you can get your sound into your loop station, and it works for any instrument or voice. It all works. How do we get the sound out of our instrument? That's the next step. The easiest way, and this is if you're going to be practicing at home, is good old-fashioned earbuds. Most earbuds are just mini, so you would need a little converter like this, mini to 1/4 inch, because all of the outputs are typically 1/4 inch on loop stations. Some have the mini, but most are 1/4 inch. So pretty simple. That's very affordable, great for practice. If you want to end up teaching and performing so others can hear, you would need some sort of powered amp, and that is like a guitar amplifier. You might even have one or can find one at a thrift store or pawn shop. They don't have to be fancy and powerful. They just have to allow you to hear the loop very clearly so that you can time it just right with your loop station. Let's talk about now looping itself. Many of you have been a part of a band or an orchestra or a choir, some sort of ensemble where the whole group has to line up right on beat 1. Looping is exactly the same, and we kind of do it the same way. In an ensemble, we have a conductor, and that person 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and boom, and we all play right on beat 1. You, as the performer, will get to do the same thing. We call it subdividing. That is, you count the beat, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you count the small part, the division of the beat, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. That allows you to really fill the space so that your loop stays right in time. And I count out loud 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and stomp. Now, if you happen to be someone who pats your foot, that can also work in your favor. Tap, 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 stomp. And we stomp in on beat 1, and then we stomp out when beat 1 returns and we want to close our loop. This is one I like to call precisely, and it will start with me subdividing, and then I will play the subdivision, and this is a great way to start. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and out. And so I lined it up right on beat 1. Let's listen that it's clear. It's pretty good. There's a little rush on there. So I would want to practice that until it's perfectly steady. The next step is to continue practicing that subdivision, but playing longer notes, because not all of our music has short little eighth notes like I was playing. This time I will subdivide one more time in my head, and I like to call this one Voices in My Head. For our sake, I'm going to do it out loud. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And now let's listen how steady that is. 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. If I wanted to test it, I could play the subdivision. We're starting to get longer notes. The loop is still the same length. It's a pretty short loop, and I recommend starting with a short loop. They're just easier to close in time. Now we're going to practice into a longer loop. This is longer notes, and then we're going to test them and see how steady we are by playing eighth notes along with them. I'm still going to do the same preparation, subdivide in my head. I call this long time. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and stomp and 1. And here we head. And it lined up pretty well. Now with each of these, I would continue practicing the loop until I feel like I have beat one lined right up with my stomp in and my stomp out. So be very, very hard on yourself, really making sure it's accurate. When you come time to perform, you want those loops to be really accurate. Otherwise, it's pretty unsettling for your audience. They might not know why, they just know that something is a little wrong. All right? So lastly, and when we start talking about producing our songs, we need to have some rhythmic interest. And we can do that by creating all kinds of crazy rhythms, maybe the beatboxing with the microphone. One of those interesting rhythms is the backbeat. And that is playing all of just the subdivisions. So not the beat, but the offbeat. Am I going to start by counting? You bet I am. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Now I'm going to play and. I would recommend getting really comfortable with playing backbeats. It can really add to your musical arrangements as we start to make them. I want to introduce you to one more piece of gear, and you might have seen me stomping on this little black pedal that's coming out the side of my loop station. Almost every loop station has a stop function. That is, it just stops everything if you have the right pedal or you can find the right button. Now, if I didn't have this, I would have to stop my loops by stomping twice, really fast like that, for this specific pedal. That's pretty challenging to do in time. I've gotten good at it, but I found it easier just to get a really inexpensive foot pedal. This is the kind of foot pedal that we would use on a keyboard for sustain. It's the same one. It works the same here, and it allows me to have just one more little bit of freedom. I recommend it to make all of your learning and performing a little bit easier. It's worth the cost. So we went through 4 different exercises precisely: voices in my head, long time, and get back. All of those lead to really precise loops, and then eventually they lead to your independence so that you can create really interesting arrangements. That's it for today's video. In our next video, we're going to talk about different types of loopers. You've seen my triple station and my single station, and we'll talk about all different ways that you can do it with your feet or with your hands, using computers, using pedals. A lot of interesting stuff out there. And then we're also going to talk about resources for music. If you want to start playing music, a lot of it is already printed out there. You just have to find it. And we'll talk about producing the loops. Do you create the bass first? Do you create the melody first? How interesting do you want it to be, and how varied do you want the music to sound? So that's what we're going to talk about in our next video. Be sure to tune in to more of the American Music Abroad Virtual Academy videos. There's a lot of great stuff out there. You can also find some of my looping videos on social media at Peter Marcus Music. And I thank you for listening. Stay well, my friends. Subscribe, like, and follow at Peter Marcus Music.